Welcome back to the chat room with Shizza. It's the end of 2025, and if you know me, you know I am so happy to be entering 2026. But on that note, there are some things that I just couldn't let go in 2025. For example, the climate crisis of Pakistan. Here's the thing though, like me as an individual alone absolutely cannot change anything. But we can have discussions, we can generate discourses that can actually become a part of eventually a policy. That is what I want to do this year and end the year on that note specifically. I've mentioned it a lot many times. My family lives in Multan, and honestly, Multan among Lahore and also Karachi is becoming unlivable, which is not a nice feeling. And I'm talking in terms of heat waves, smog at this point in time. I mean, every other year we have flash floods, hailstorms, and whatnot. In the north, we have droughts happening. So many things I want to talk about, and I couldn't think of someone better than Dr. Abrar Chaudhury, who happens to be a climate financing and sustainability expert, here in the studio with me. Hello, Dr. Abrar. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hello, Shizza. How are you doing?
I'm doing absolutely great. Thank you for making time just right in time before we wrap up the year. Um, Let me start with something very simple. Why climate? Did you just like hop onto something that was trending? Did you feel very deeply about this? How did this become your journey?
So, first of all, I'm so happy. As you said, it's the last thing that you're doing for 2025. So, I hope it's the first thing that we think about when 2026 comes in as well, because absolutely, climate should be at top of our minds. And I'll make the case for, I hope by the end of it, I'll make a strong case why we need to think about this. For my personal journey, not at all a trend. I grew up in Lahore. We're a climate vulnerable country, lots of monsoons, we would see flooding. And I'm talking about back in 2010, we had these big floods in Pakistan. One-fifth of the country was underwater. And I had absolutely no idea about climate. I was trained as a chartered accountant. This is what my family did. I was a third generation accountant, living a comfortable life, running a family practice, working with large corporations, helping them actually, make a lot of money. So life was great. But for me, just coming from Lahore, I was like, why do we have these floods? We have monsoons coming every year. Why are we not doing anything about it? So what I knew, I just went around. I spoke to lots of people. I went to policymakers. I went to experts. I said, why is this happening? I know we have monsoons, but how come the entire country is underwater? Why aren't we prepared? Why aren't we doing anything about it? And, I got a not a good enough answer. They told me, it's a once in a century flood. We can't prepare for that. This is how things work. And I knew, no, there is more to it. So I told my family, I said, I want to understand climate. I want to understand, why this is happening.
Definitely. And I do want to talk more about your personal journey of how you feel so deeply about this. But coming to, let's take floods for now. It's not bad weather anymore. It's a climate crisis. And this year, I think we officially declared climate emergency also. I want you to first of all explain to us what does it mean when a country says, okay, we are facing a climate emergency. What changes should be made immediately so that at least, let's say, the next 5 to 10 years are slightly under control?
Because the first thing, for the longest time, you know, not just Pakistan, the world did not want to attribute these damages to climate. And the reason was because the moment you start to say, look, there's floods happening in Pakistan, it's because of climate, suddenly that global obligation comes in, that equity challenge comes in, that, look, the West has developed, there was no checks, they were emitting as much as they wanted to, they've developed. And climate is a sort of thing that doesn't have any boundaries, it doesn't have any geography. What happens in the US or in Europe has direct impacts in countries like Pakistan. The only difference is that we don't have the capacity to deal with that challenge. So there was a demand that, look, we haven't caused it, we need money. So for the longest time, it was like, no, this is not climate, because the moment you accept it, there's an obligation to do something about it. So the world was like, no, it's environmental damage, extreme events happen, this is act of nature. Look at history. Last 10, 20 years, and it's interesting that science has been building that case. And it's only now, which sometimes is mind-boggling, that it's taken us so long to make the case, because when you bring sciences, you have to bring in facts, you have to bring in data. And now this recognition has come in. Actually, these extreme events are a cause of climate change. They're not just an act of nature. They're not a natural phenomena. They're actually climate-induced extreme events. And therefore, for a country like Pakistan, it's extremely important to recognize that, look, we can't do much about it on our own. The world also has to recognize that it is a climate emergency. So I'm glad that they've made this declaration, because it shows that now we are following science. We are accepting that we need action. And I think that's where we need to get to.
Makes sense. But Dr. Abrar, I think you yourself said that it's not only Pakistan, the world has to act on it. So, us declaring an emergency, first of all, let's be very clear. This is one of our favorite facts, ladies and gentlemen. We contribute less than 1% to the global carbon emissions, yet we are one of the worst hit countries all across the globe. So, the development of West came at the expense of countries like ours. It's not stopping billionaires from using private jets for their tours or building industries, again, at the expense of countries like ours. So, how do we bring everyone on the same page? Because the thing is, so for someone living in Pakistan, and I'm sorry to say, you and I, we're still privileged people. There are people living in downtrodden segments of the society who are way more hit than we are. So for someone living in that part of Pakistan compared to someone living in the US who's continuously practicing bad, how do you even use the word, like bad carbon practices,
Yeah, or
adding
bad
to the
system. Yeah,
footprint?
absolutely.
How it's just beyond that person. They're not sensitive to the cause because they're not facing the music of it. How do we bring everyone to the same
Look,
page?
my case is always there that we shouldn't focus just, if I'm a small farmer and if my practices are not, sustainable or don't meet the global standards, I'm like, no, they shouldn't be carrying the burden. We can't go to a farm and say, look, change your practice. What happens is often we shift everything to that segment because they're the one who closest to climate and will say, no, 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 change your practice, do this, don't apply fertilizer, put some sustainable fertilizer in. Your yield will drop, but that's okay because it helps the environment. I think that's not an equitable case. I think what we have to think about is going after, these large businesses, these large corporations. Of course, we should always make that argument and we should always keep it on the table that underneath climate is an equity challenge. Yes, countries, global, West or global North countries have to reduce their consumption. There's so much food waste, like 30% of food produced is wasted. All those issues are there. But now the challenge that we're facing, Shizza, is that, we have Pakistan. We can only manage Pakistan. We can make that case globally, but we have to start thinking about what can we do here. We can't be passive. We can't wait for the rest of the world to show up. And sadly, they haven't. And the reason is, when you say Pakistan has less than 1%, there are many other countries that have less than 1% as well. And they're also climate vulnerable. So, what ends up happening, we have floods in 2022 in Pakistan. There'll be drought in Africa 2023. So the world moves on and keeps moving on to where those disasters are happening. I think by declaring a climate emergency, what we want to signal, not just to the world, but we want to signal to everyone here is, sadly, we have to take care of ourselves. We have to put in policies. We have to ensure, as you said, we have to ensure that the farmers or the communities that are most impacted by climate change, we are supporting them. We're
Right.
doing something about it.
And most definitely so, because even in the 2025 floods, first of all, let's get this out of the way, they were not unexpected. It did not come by surprise. To people who were going through it, probably yes. They probably did not assume the magnitude that was going to come with these floods. Over 1,000 deaths, unfortunately. Land losses, of course, human life losses, we have already mentioned. Um, you know, so many, and again, it comes down to the farmers because we are largely an agrarian based society. So, for someone who produces food items for us to consume and brings it to the market is food insecure himself because of practices like this. And then the effects of the practices like this, such as floods. When you say that we have to start within the country, then I'm pretty sure you mean that okay, we don't need to go to COP conferences anymore or international, summits anymore because let's sit at home and discuss what is wrong here. Do we have data for any of that? Do we have records to follow up?
No, it's a great point, and just kind of building on your point. Look, when you go globally, right? We go to COPs or we go to any of those summits, or we go to global funders or we go to global institutions. What's really important is to have your house in order. Like imagine, I'm a startup. Like I'll go in a different direction. I'm a startup. I want funding from an investor, and I don't have information to offer. I can't make a case for them. I can't give them the data. I can't give them the information. Who would fund you? Even though there's a need, they'll say, why don't you go back? Why don't you get this information? Why don't you create all of this information and then come back to me with a stronger case? I think with Pakistan, what I've been seeing and I've been advocating is, look, you can't use this process of vulnerability as the first step. You can't say, look, I'm vulnerable, मैं बेचारा हूँ, मेरे साथ, so much bad has happened, come help me. There isn't enough funding out there. When I look at global funding, there isn't enough money to go on that direction only. I think what we need to do is take 3 steps forward.
Okay.
And that means, how would we do this, right? First of all, as you pointed out, let's work on evidence-based actions. We have so much data out there. And I'll give you an example, right? Last couple of days, why I'm in Islamabad is I've been running this Pakistan climate workshop. And what I saw there was, when I'm in Oxford, these institutions succeed, or the country succeeds, because there's so much research and data that comes out from those universities that supports policymakers. So every time there's a policy that needs to be done, they'll come to your university, they'll pick data from them, because that information is objective. It's not something that you're selling. And that helps their case. When I come to Pakistan, I don't see that happening, right? I don't see that information flowing. I don't see that information or universities informing policymakers based on their data. So I built this program and I said, I'm a Pakistani. I've privileged to spend time in Oxford. How about I bring people from Oxford, who are good at this, make them spend time with academics, researchers from Pakistan, and build those collaboration networks to help them produce and push their data forward.
We can, talk about so many things regarding this. Of course, we have to keep it short, but I'm going to bring you back to funding, where you mentioned that global commitment towards climate funding is not as such, and the figures were just staggering. We often say, and by we, I mean Pakistan, we want funding that is grants and not loans. First of all, do explain to me why so. Second of all, it's not like we didn't get funding at all. We received a huge amount after the 2022 floods. The issue which remains is no one got to see any proof of how and where the funding was spent. What happened? Because when people face the same thing, even worse this year, in terms of floods I'm talking about, they will question you on the funding. Where did that go? So it's not like we aren't receiving any.
So absolutely, there's so many dimensions to your question, because you're right, it kind of creates these challenges. So if I start with like global funding, okay, what the positive side that we've seen with climate finance is that it is growing. So it's been globally, it's been growing. I think right now the latest figures were like $1.2 trillion. We need 6 trillion. Or, in 2030 or 2050, we need $10 trillion. So there is progress happening in global finance. Now, Pakistan, if I get the figures right, I think got about $4 billion out of it. For me, that's a very small number, because if I look at Pakistan's GDP size, it's 1% of the global economy. If just if you do like this back of our envelope calculation, so it's 1%. Now, if I think that by 2030 or by 2035 there should be $6 trillion, Pakistan should be getting about $60 billion, right? And we're at sometimes at 4. Next year it'll drop to 2, some 1. So we know that the potential is there from an equity perspective, but we haven't been able to get that amount of money. And there's several reasons for that. I think I'll come to your question on that and I'll explain why we're struggling. First is, yes, from a climate equity perspective, if we go with this argument, which is like, CBDR, which is common but distributed responsibly, that we all share the challenge of climate change, but our responsibilities are different. So if you're the global north, I would say, look, you've caused it, I need grants because why should I pay you back? This is something that you need to spend. But what we're also seeing globally is there's a big cost of, there's a inflation is happening, right? There's a cost of living crisis. Countries are actually going the other way. US pulled out of global negotiations because everyone's focusing on domestic challenges. And those optics make it very hard for countries like US or Europe when they have crisis within to send money outside. So they're pushing back on that.
Trump doesn't even agree that climate crisis exists, so that's another story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, actually my take on that is he wants to say what the public wants to hear. I'm sure he believes in it. He doesn't want to say it because that's what his vote base.
Very political.
It's very political. It's very political. And it's only $2 billion that they had committed. It's nothing. But it's the optics. It's the optics. So loan by definition, and this is where most of our money comes in, right? I think multilaterals, I don't want to criticize multilaterals because that's their role. But if you look at World Bank, Asian Development Bank, they by design can only give loans.
Okay.
So when they give loans for climate, or especially for climate adaptation, which means, we're building capacity of people to deal with those challenges, it eventually has to be paid back.
Okay.
So how do you pay it back? There's no economic case for it. If someone had flooding and we rebuild their home, now if I say at the end, okay, maybe not that person, but I need to be repaid for the houses that we've built, where will that money come from? So by definition, loans are very problematic. And they don't fit in the definition of climate in many ways.
Right.
Yes, you can take loans if I'm generating an economic activity. Let's say I have a big farm, I want technology for my farm, I can go out, get loans, add to my income, get carbon credits, I can pay that loan off. So if there's a business case behind it, absolutely loans make sense. But eventually those loans have to be repaid. So when we look at the amount of money that's coming in and you take the loan amount out, then the figure is absolutely small. The way to move forward is on this.
Sorry,
Okay.
Dr. Abrar, for cutting you out, but is this where grants come in then?
Yes, so we need grants. So grants are money that you don't have to repay.
Right.
Right? It's money that comes in. But globally, the grant level is falling. One example, we were getting lots of grants from USAID as well. They packed up.
Yeah.
They finished. Okay. We shouldn't be, it also shows how reliant we become on grants because if our organizations are always working on grants, remember, they can stop anytime.
Anytime,
It's
yeah.
a tap that I can shut because it's not sustainable. So then we become extremely vulnerable. I think our approach should be no grants, no loans. Yes, grants can come in to support where nothing else can happen. Our case has to be based on linking climate with economic activity, with trade. We have to make sure that everything that we do translates into generating some form of revenue because then that would help make it sustainable. That would help pay. And as an example, let's take a small farmer, right? We go to a small farmer, we give them money for their practices, right? It's climate practices. We get some grant. What happens? They'll do those practices and then no one takes their product or the product is wasted. So we've just haven't really helped anyone. But if I went the other way around and I picked up one of our large food manufacturing corporations, right? And I would say, look, you're a food manufacturer. your product should be net zero climate resilient, right? You're producing rice. You're exporting this. Maybe it's going to the rest of the world. You should take responsibility for your supply chain. Because if you help your farmers reduce, use less water, less resources, less fertilizer, and still increase that production, you are benefiting from it. Your footprint is low. And where you can't justify the cost, you can start to go to climate finance and say, look, this is the gap I have. I have a farmer, I need to put some sustainable water solution here. I don't have enough money to fund. If you fund me, this will help me generate more rice, more sustainable rice. I can go sell this rice, hopefully at a premium, and then actually I can help pay this finance amount. So suddenly you start to connect things together. And I think in Pakistan, the challenge is we have so many different small programs, initiatives that happen that start and then they stop here because they're not connected.
Right.
And I think that's where we need to think of it as a single approach.
It definitely makes a lot of sense. I'm going to bring up a scholarly narrative that is out there, and I think you are absolutely the right person to either validate it or debunk it. So, colonial era engineering decisions, let's say, for example, some say that the Indus Basin irrigation system is broken. Some say that Pakistan's flood vulnerability comes from the colonial era engineering. Is there any truth to it? I mean, because that is something we cannot undo, right?
I think it's a mixture of it's a combination of these things, right? Again, I'm not a river expert, but I think I've looked at some of these things. When you look at our river system, right, what's happened with Indus is that there's a lot of human intervention that's come in. We've built around the rivers. Typically across rivers you have floodplains that cannot be encroached. Then we've also, changed the direction of the river. We've embanked it, and so it's a natural body. And then what happens? You try to control a natural body, right, by engineering. On the other side, we have climate change. It wasn't there when these infrastructure were built. You have global warming on one side, you have glacial melts happening on the other side. Suddenly, you throw a lot of water in a system that wasn't designed for it. What would happen? Flooding will come in. When flooding comes in, what happens? You don't have flood plains because people have encroached it, or you've created housing schemes on one side, or you've made into a farmland. And so there is no place for the water to go. And I know there are good projects coming. I think WWF is doing this project, Recharge, where they try to make sure that the flood water actually goes inside in our groundwater. Those are like small things compared to the challenge. And then you have, monsoons coming in. There's a lot of water that comes in. So that's why we say it's a human-induced climate disaster. Humans are part of it. And now we have to rethink, we have to reimagine, but we have to be clear that, look, this will continue to happen. We can't just wait and sit for something else to happen. True. And for me, that's where I come in and say, I talk to policymakers, I talk to private sector. I say, look, you're a private sector, but you're a citizen of Pakistan. If flood comes, if smog comes, you're not immune to it. We all face the same crisis. So why can't we just start to change the way we work? Why can't we put climate in the center of what we do? Like, my challenge for everyone is, like I always say this, it's like, okay, here's a diary, right? Today, I make this challenge that I want the most sustainable diary in the world. Like, this is my goal. This is my goal. What will I do? I will go and start to search for materials. I'll say, okay, what is a sustainable material that needs to happen? Okay, how can I get the right paper? How can I use less water? Because that's my goal. Because our goal in our business, in our world is profit, we do everything around to maximize profit. And I'm saying that maximization of profit will be eroded because every time there's a damage, every time there's a flood, your profit level will start to fall. Your supply chain will be broken. Your factory will be flooded. Your products will go down. Your agriculture production will be wasted. And we've seen those billions of dollars of losses, $30 billion loss in 2022. We don't have the figure even right now of what the 2025 figure is. So I'm saying, why can't we be proactive and say, let's spend money building infrastructure so next time the flood comes, next time the extreme event comes, we can do something about it. We cannot, Shizza, sadly, we cannot stop these events from happening.
Right.
Climate has
We can
already passed that tipping. It may take 50 years to reverse it. So
Right.
that we have to think about.
I don't, so at this point, I don't even know if there's any possibility of reversing it. I think we have to adapt and move forward. But I'm going to stick by it. What I'm going to say is, Dr. Abrar, when we talk about a brilliant example, because that makes you think you only have to feel really deeply about a cause to be actually performing actions to make a change. I don't see that happening because the people who are in decision making positions are not proactive in this very case. So when we say that we don't even have the right stats for 2025 floods, we already know it's going to happen again next year. So, I mean, fingers crossed, we really, really hope it's going to be slightly better, if not completely better. Anyway, moving on, because this discussion, of course, we can delve in so deeper. This is going to be a two-tiered question, a very interesting one because this is our reality, whether we like it or not. Smog and floods. So, smog at the moment, because we're in the season, it's crazy. I mean, insane. 30% of Punjab's smog situation happens across the border between Pakistan and India. So it's not like it's only us, it's both of. And because we're geographically so connected, we cannot, let go of each other in terms of climate crisis. Similar with floods. Do you think, is there any political, let's say, reality where Pakistan and India can, in this specific case, come together on a table and be like, you know what, these are the two problems that are interconnected. Both of us are facing it. Let's share our data. Let's do something to save our people. What can be done?
That's the hope, right? I know, you can be, bad neighbors or you can be unfriendly neighbors, but when you have a connected cause, that's the time when you say, look, we can still disagree, we can still not agree on many things, but this is a common problem that can only be solved when neighbors come together.
Right.
As I said, climate has no boundary. Smog has no boundary. Yes, there are local elements to it, and we can do much more, and we can come to that. And I'm not saying it's just cross-border, but it does make a difference because we share a massive border together. So I'm hoping that those are the channels that will allow us to work together. We always say, look, climate, environment, poverty, these are in many ways system challenges. Or
Right.
another word could be these are wicked problems. And wicked problem means these are challenges you cannot solve alone. Like that's the humility you want. I can't solve this alone. I need others to come in. And in this case, if we share water together, we have to talk to our neighbor and say, look, this is a challenge we share together. We can't solve it alone. We know one part of it. You own the other part of it. How can we start to talk? So
But it has to be a trustable neighbor, no?
absolutely. And I think that's where I hope, I can't go on the political side of it, but I hope that's where researchers come in. So I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
There are research organizations that don't care about these things, right? Because they're sharing similar things. I myself, I'm going to be doing a project with some colleagues from India and Oxford, on the solar revolution in Pakistan. Because I've been making this case for them that look, there may be lots of challenges, but right now, everyone outside of Pakistan is talking about what's happening in solar. That how suddenly, how did this country start to become a massive, adopter of solar? Yes, we are importing it. Those are other issues. How did this happen? It's not happening in other countries. And that's the story we want to tell others. That's the story that India needs to hear. That's the story our neighbors need to hear. That look, there is something that can happen. Once you start a chain, once you start something positive, whether it's through policy, whether it was because of a need, whether it was because our grid wasn't great, but it kickstarts and you can't stop that revolution. And that's what we're hoping, that once we start to engage on these elements, we can start to find solutions together.
That actually makes me think of a brilliant, brilliant team, which is yes, employing solar to solve a lot of problems. So, for example, like in the drought prone areas of Pakistan, this organization is called Boonde Shams. I think they're doing a brilliant job. Shout out. Absolutely no connection, but just you have to appreciate, credits due where it's due. So, what they are doing is in areas like Thar, where you cannot even dig out water, they are planting solar cells where dirty water is being cleaned and being, made drinkable. That's brilliant. And this is a homegrown solution, first of all. We really want similar things to come up in the future on probably a larger scale. But we're really near the end, but I am going to take you into a political debate. It can be a yes or no question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you feel like political instability has something to do with our climate actions?
Absolutely. Look, you can't, you if you think about, you know, policies, if you look at the political structure, what happens is we get distracted. Instead of aligning, bringing all our forces together, all these different ministries, all these semi-autonomous organizations, all the private sector coming together and creating, let's say, a sustainable Pakistan brand, we're always like distracted. Something else is happening. Every time I'm here, there's a breaking news. One crisis after the other crisis. And what's happening is we're not looking at the climate crisis.
It's not a priority.
It's not a priority, but it should be at the forefront. What country will we have if it's submerged? What country will we have if we cannot go out and breathe? What will our children say? The young children that are coming up in school, what will they say? It's like, guys, you knew about, you can't say, oh, I didn't know about it. You knew about this climate challenge and you did nothing? Like, how is that even possible? What sort of political system can exist when you're not giving basic needs? So clean air is a human right.
Yeah.
Clean water is a human right. Access to food should be a human right. And so for me, it's so basic that, look, guys, forget all of this. We have, Shizza, the example that you gave, homegrown solutions. For me, that's the biggest advantage Pakistan has. Why? We face these crises, right? We face floods. We face smog. Facing drought. What happens? We create these solutions. Once we create the solutions, the rest of the world is going to face this as well. And I'm saying, why aren't Pakistani climate innovation solving problems of the rest of the world? Why aren't we going to other countries and say, look, we can help you with floods because we see it? That's how Netherlands emerged, right? They didn't have a lot of space.
Right.
Now they're a country that has the best technology for food production, best technology for reclaiming land. Because when you create solutions based on your own problems, you are the leader in that.
Absolutely.
And I think Pakistan can be the smog leader of the world, can be a drought leader in the world,
Floods.
flood leader in the
Heat
world.
waves,
Because
so many things.
honestly, smog will happen elsewhere. It's not just a Pakistan problem. It's a
Yeah,
development
definitely.
problem. It's not something that's just us. Yes, our policies have made it worse, but climate crisis will continue to keep in. And I think the most positive thing that I see right now is not to put it on the youth, but we have a young population out there. We have AI and technology that's coming in. That's levelizing that disparity. Now you can sit at your home and create a data solution that can start to capture using satellite data. You can do it from home. Someone can create an app, someone can create a solution. So we no longer have that excuse that we don't have this information, right?
True.
So for me, if we get young people involved, if we get this technology involved, if we get all these different actors involved, I see Pakistan as a powerhouse rather than a climate vulnerable country. I see Pakistan as a climate solution country.
Definitely.
That we build solution and we sell to the rest of the world.
I mean, here's to hoping that 2026 is going to be the start of that, definitely. Towards the end of the podcast, I want this to be a sort of a rapid fire round, but where we take away a lot of things. So it's just 3 questions. Let's keep it short and crispy. One climate myth you want Pakistanis to stop believing.
So one climate myth that I want everyone to recognize is that, we always say we're not contributing. That is actually not true. Our contributions are increasing. It's just our population size is very large. But I think our absolute emissions are going up. So we need to also think about how to create low emission strategies.
Interesting. I didn't even think about that. Next one, optimistic or pessimistic about Pakistan's climatic future?
Look, I'm always optimistic. I
Okay.
think we'll find a way out. I believe in our people. I believe in our society.
That's a positive note to end the podcast. And the last one is going to be one uncomfortable truth that the policymakers or the public just don't like to face about the climate crisis of Pakistan.
So uncomfortable truth. I feel that what we're always avoiding or are not talking about is why are we not spending climate money on climate activities in Pakistan? We're always thinking, always hoping there's a big pot of money waiting outside that will actually come in and solve our crisis. No, actually, our domestic investments have to come in. Our banks need to spend money on it. Our investors who are closest to this action actually need to invest in these challenges. It's not a foreign funded project.
Absolutely, that makes true sense. And thank you so much, Dr. Abrar, for being with us and closing 2025 on a positive note. I'd rather say I think we had positive discussions. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, conversations never end in the chat room, but we will continue this into 2026. I am just hopeful of the fact that at least we have minds like Dr. Abrar here in the country, which are contributing to eventually a change. So I'm going to end this podcast on the note that, first of all, let's remember that we do contribute to carbon emissions. Let's take that into control. Second of all, let's be positive about the change. Let's be patient about the change. And if we work together, I really do think we will be able to fight the climate crisis. Until next time, take care.